still experimenting with 60p, and I'll actually explain why that cut off. I think it's an interesting point to have. But first, I'm going to fix what I broke right before the show started. You know how it is. There we go. That's fixed, and that's set up, and the stream is happening. And with any luck, we'll actually have a show here. Let's just, let's get the screen up here. Go to my live shows. Greetings, good mornings, good salutations, and all that good stuff. Hope y'all are having a good morning so far. The clock won't start. You gotta like load it, maybe turn it off and back on and switch it over. Whoa, I'll figure it out. Ryan's trying to get the clock going. There he goes. Apparently now there is a clock. It's here. Wait, Ryan, tell me, am I holding it right? Other side. This side? I didn't know that. Tell me nothing. Nobody tells me anything. Where's it here? Am I higher, higher, higher? Perfect. There. Ah. Anyway, let's see here. Pop out this chat here. See what's going on in the chit-chat room. Good morning to Nebraska, Daddy MCC, Balak in France. Hello, and Evtonic somewhere else. Marco Corzani. Hello from Frankfurt. God, look at that. We already got in 3 nations here. I love it. Possibly 4. Hello from Kansas City. Greetings to Kansas City. I love it. I love seeing everybody say hello and good morning in here. It just makes me happy and all warm and fuzzy inside. Makes me feel like what I'm doing is worthwhile. Somebody cares. Somebody's watching. North Carolina, downtown Ashland. What are you doing downtown, buddy? Sean Mark Nipper, who is a friend and colleague here in Yield, Ashland, Oregon, is apparently hanging out downtown today. Well, you actually got a connection downtown? How'd that work? It's like no internet connection downtown. It sucks. They really got to fix that. And the AFN provides Wi-Fi downtown, but I can never get it to connect. And I've told them that, and they go, we'll try and fix it. It is not raining here, Evtonic. It is a gorgeous day outside. It's really actually really nice today. In fact, let's just see what it looks like up on Mount Ashland, because that is always something lovely to look at. One of these days, I want to have a webcam on my roof so that I can show you, look, this is what it looks like outside today, right now. But I don't have that yet. And apparently I got a minute 3. Why? Oh, come on, there we go. Let's see what Mount Ashland's looking like today. It's so funny, the thumbnail is still from when it was smoky, but once you actually start playing it, you get to see, oh, look at this, perfection. It is gorgeous up there. Apparently, I didn't see it, but my wife told me there was a wee bit of snow up here a few days ago. It's clearly gone now, unless that's snow. Probably not. There's a wee bit of snow up there. Go figure, because it's never too early for snow, especially if you're a skier, which I'm not, but there you go. Hey, Johnny Still saying you don't see the smoothness of 60p. It looks like 30p to you. All right, interesting. Oh, Sean's in your new office. Fantastic. So connection sucks at 32,000 feet. Patrick, you're watching from the air? That is awesome. American Wi-Fi is not stream worthy. Well, that is fantastic that you're doing. Yeah, they create their streams so that you can't do live stream because they don't want you streaming from Netflix and that sort of thing, curiously enough. So there you go. Let's see who else is here. I still can't put the chat screen up. I know, I'm sorry. That'll change. This is probably our last 60p test. I don't know, maybe we'll do more, but I don't have enough converters to go 60p everywhere. And somebody's already saying it doesn't look like 60p, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit more once the show actually starts, because I think it's interesting to those who want to know these things. Greetings, Johnny Cell Productions. Greetings again, Sean, Trevor, Stuart. Good morning, Patrick Hood, Bart, and Trevor again. Excellent. Love seeing you all here. All right. Well, let's have yourselves a show, shall we? On today's Photo Moment, this is an AMA, an Ask Me Anything. In other words, I didn't actually have a show. But let's see if we can have some fun, shall we? And that's the wrong graphic. There's the right graphic. What? They're still getting my audio? What? How does that even make sense? Hold on. Oh, right, because you got to do the thing. Yes, we definitely got to. We're going to do that again so we have a cleaner intro with the right graphic. Yeah, I know. We got things to fix here. Let's try this again, shall we? On today's show, it is an AMA, and Ask Me Anything, and that really means that I didn't have a show planned, but we're still going to have some fun here. Yes, the audio cuts off. Okay, so first let me explain what's happening with the audio and this hopefully last one of these tests. I'm still trying to get 60p to work on Wirecast. And yesterday's show was done using OBS, Open Broadcast Software, System Services, something, OBS, open source. It's really cool. And it worked. 60p worked beautifully. well, I shouldn't say I don't have the control. I don't know how to control OBS the same way that I do Wirecast. So we have all this stuff set up in Wirecast. We haven't rebuilt all that in OBS. And so I just kind of, it was an experiment. It went 60p, great. We're going to go back to Wirecast and go back to 24p. But Wirecast tech support emailed me back last night and said, hey, here's another thing we want you to try. So we're trying 60p on Wirecast right now, which you got to tell me, does it look like 60p? So I know that, first of all, in YouTube, you got to go down to the little cog dealio and tell it to show you 1080p 60, just in case it isn't already. And then you got to tell me if it looks smooth like 60p, which if you're not really attuned to 30 versus 60, you might not be able to tell. But those of you who know, you know that you know, and you should be able to tell the difference, especially when I move and dance. Now, I don't know if this is working at 60p. There was no testing. We just enabled the checkboxes that they said to enable, and off we went. So we're seeing what happened. Now, there was a show in the pre-show, or comment in the pre-show that said that it didn't look like it, but we will see what happens. All right, so let's see here what else is happening in the... Oh, and the reason the music cuts off. So this is a really interesting limitation of the ATEM, my hardware switcher. You'd think if you spent the kind of money that I spent on this piece of hardware, that you could load more than 720 frames of video into it to play video. But you can't. 720 is the max. You have two frame stores, two video, what do they call it? Clip 1, clip 2, media, playback, whatever, two of them. And you have a slider, you can decide one of them gets 10 and the other one gets 710 or whatever you want. But there's a max total of 720 frames, which is kind of annoying. So let's see here, math. Let's do math. Let's see here. 720, when I'm doing 24 frames per second, that means I get 30 seconds worth of video that I can play in there. However, 720 at 60 frames per second means I only get 12 seconds worth of video. Now, I'm not actually using it for video. Now, technically, when I do this, and in a moment here, the little thing's going to pop up on the bottom, that is video. That is a 360 frame long video that has been exported out as still frames and uploaded as individual still frames. So there, that animation right there. And actually, I haven't even watched it. It should be happening faster than usual. Yeah, I think that's faster than usual because it's playing at double the frame rate. So that's half of them. That's 360 of them. The other 360 are actually blank frames. They're just clear PNG files because I have no way to play music through the ATEM without attaching it to a video file. And when you upload it, here you can take a look at this. Here it is. When you upload a music file, so stereo nuts, that's the music that you hear, called high-tech glitch. That's the music that you hear. You see here it's 360 out of 360 frames that are being used, but it's actually a transparent file. And that's just what I named it, but it's a transparent file. And so I have to have video files here, still files here, to be a video for this to play music, which is super weird and annoying. But that's the way it works. And so because this is now double the frame rate, those frames run out in half the time. And once the frames run out, the music stops. So that's why you're hearing the music cut off. It's enough to drive a man batty. That is, honestly, it's one of the most annoying things about the ATEM. $4,000 for this box, and it has a 720 frame store. Insanity. I don't get it. But anyway, that's what we've got. Okay, other than that, I love it. So, Balik is saying, in your opinion, it's not 60p. Yeah, I think you're probably right. Scoregasm says, if you're using OBS, can't you just use that to drag the chat screen on your main video feed? Yes, you can. So OBS and Wirecast allow you to do all the picture-in-picture stuff that you see me doing here. So when I don't know, let's do here this. When I do a little picture-in-picture there, when I don't know if this is going to work. No, that's not the right preset. But anyway, all the different picture-in-picture things that I do, the split screens, the overlays, all that stuff you can technically do in... Why is Siri waking up? You can technically do in Wirecast, or I think OBS as well. I don't have the experience with it. The problem is, and I've done whole shows on this, the problem is that it's massively unreliable. Wirecast has been in the past an utter disaster for really complex setups, and I gave up on it years ago. It couldn't handle it. Now, it has been upgraded now twice. There's now version 8 out. But it didn't, no. And the other thing is that even though it does all the picture-in-picture, you still have to get the image into a computer. So now you're talking about taking a single computer, right, and bringing in all the different cameras. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different sources feeding into it. That means I have to have 6 different converters to go from HDMI or SDI into USB or Thunderbolt. Now, USB is massively less reliable than going in Thunderbolt. It's a shared bandwidth, so you reach your bandwidth cap very quickly when you're plugging in 1080p streams. And Thunderbolt, you only have 2 Thunderbolt ports on most Macs. I think maybe the new iMac will have 3, and then you can get your Mac Pro, which has, what, 6? But once you run out, you run out. There's no hubs. It's insane. So not the happiest camper in that regard. So that's yet another reason. But then your computer would have to be powerful enough, assuming you could get the bandwidth to bring all that data in to process all of that. And there's no way, not with the amount of sources that I'm feeding into it. So forget about it. We just cannot do this show entirely in software. So that is that. Remember, this is an AMA show, so anything you want to ask, throw it in. This is what we're doing in the show. We're just answering questions. Tyler says, it looks like 30p on my Chromecast Ultra. I'm assuming you're at 1/120th of a shutter speed. I am. That's what it looks like to me. Correct. I am at 1/120th of a shutter speed, and supposedly at 60p, but apparently not, because there you go. Odd comments coming up here. So remember, if you have a question you want me to address, make sure you type in @PhotoJoseph in front of it, and that way I will see it on screen. Stuart says, did you upgrade to High Sierra? I did not. Heard there are security issues. Oh, that's bad. I have not yet. That just came out yesterday, right? No, I haven't yet. I'm about to leave on a trip, and I'm not going to upgrade my laptop before I go because I need this to work on the trip. Major upgrades right before you leave, bad idea. So I'll do that when I get back, and I will be doing some shows around the Photos update now that we have parity across High Sierra and iOS 11 and the new Photos features. That I will be doing some demos on, some videos on, so look forward to that. They won't be part of this show. That'll be part of the PhotoApps.expert live training stuff, but definitely want to check into that. Tom, I'm going to answer your question, but remember, put in an @PhotoJoseph. Everybody, if you want your question answered, type @PhotoJoseph in front of your question. It pops it up nice and red on my screen. I'd show it to you, but I can't, but that's what it does. Tom says, what sort of folder hierarchy do you recommend for organization when it comes to sorting photos? Oh, good Lord. I go by year, month, then event. However, have you any tips for photos that don't have proper metadata? Okay, so that's a huge question. I've actually done a lot of videos around file organization, dating back to the early Aperture days all the way through Lightroom. My personal preference, the way that I store things, is by date, pretty much as you have mentioned here. I think chronologically. I am more likely to be able to think, okay, this was an event that happened in 2007 than I am to, I don't know, remember what the hell I called that event. So my pictures are stored in a year folder, and then inside of every year folder is a month folder, inside of every month folder is a day folder, and then there we go. And now the pictures that go in there always get renamed with something relevant to the shoot, whether it's a client name or location or some 1 or 2 keywords that get embedded into the file names. That's as far as I'm going to go on that, but that is my basic organization, is chronologically year, month, day, and that's just how I like to do it. Trevor says, I've been shooting a lot of X teleconverter, the extended teleconverter. Awesome. That's in the GH5 and the GH4. And is it on the non-GH? I think that's only a GH feature. Especially in anamorphic. Has anyone do actual quality degradation tests? What happens at the sensor level to get such results? Okay, so I don't know about the quality degradation test, but let me explain what's happening here. So he's talking about, there's a mode that you can enter on the GH series cameras called extended. It's just EX period, so extended teleconverter. And a teleconverter, let's forget about the camera for a second. A teleconverter is a piece of glass, a lens, if you will, that goes between your camera and your lens. So if you have a 100 millimeter lens and you have a 2x teleconverter, then you put this in between the camera and the lens, and it makes the lens a 200 millimeter lens. You drop in quality a little bit, you lose aperture, but overall it is a relatively inexpensive solution to get more reach out of your lens. So that's how it happens optically in hardware. On the camera, this is a feature that is available in video mode that allows you to punch into the sensor. Now you might be thinking, whoa, don't want to punch into the sensor because then you're scaling up. Well, here's what's happening. So you've got a sensor on the GH5, GH4 is a little bit lower, but on the GH5 that is 5,000 something pixels wide. I forget the number, but anyway, 5,000 something, but let's just call it 5,000, make it easy. We're gonna make the numbers really easy. Pretend it's 5,000 pixels wide. And you're shooting 4K, Ultra HD, which is 3840 wide. Let's just call it 4,000, again, just to make it easy. So you've got 5,000 pixels, but what you're shooting, your actual output is only 4,000 pixels wide. If you're shooting 1080p, then it's only 1920 wide, so we'll call it 2,000 pixels wide. So you got a 5,000 pixel sensor, 4,000 for Ultra HD, and 2,000 for HD. Now, the way that the GH5 works is the GH5 uses the entire sensor no matter what you're outputting. So if you're shooting 4K, you use the entire sensor and it scales that down to 4K. If you're shooting 1080p, it uses the entire sensor and scales that down to 1080p. The advantage of the scaling is you get something called subsampling, which happens when you scale images down, and you end up with a little bit of extra detail in the really fine detailed areas. It can just look a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer. It's subtle. You'll see a bigger difference going to 1080p than you will go to 4K. It's subtle, but it's there. It's a slight difference in there. If you're however, okay, so that's that. 5K scaled down to 4 or 5K scaled down to 2K. However, you can essentially disable using the full sensor and only use the 4K for Ultra HD or the 2K wide for HD that you need. You're not scaling up. You're just not doing any scaling at all. So if you turn on extended teleconversion and you're shooting, you got a 5,000 wide sensor and you're only shooting 4,000, basically you crop into the sensor a little bit. Now again, you're not scaling up. You're not going past that and scaling up. So you're not interpolating, you're not adding any pixels. You are now recording pixel for pixel what the sensor sees. And because your sensor started this big but now went this big, you've effectively zoomed into the scene a little bit. You get a little bit of extra range. If you go all the way down to 1080, so if you're shooting just regular HD, then you go way in, and now it's an over 2x conversion. You're getting more than twice as close without any quality loss. You are now using just the actual native 1920 by 1080 pixels wide sensors of your pixels of your sensor, and so you get a very clean, cropped in, zoomed output. It's a super, super convenient way to get that extra zoom without any quality loss. Now, there may be a difference. There will be a slight difference in the quality because one has the subsampling and one doesn't, but you're not adding pixels, so you're not actually interpolating, so the image quality will still look very, very good. Both of them are going to look very good. So you might see some differences in the really fine details where that subsampling comes into play, but otherwise they should look pretty much the same. So it's a fantastic, fantastic feature that's on there. Highly recommend checking that out if you're a GH user, for sure. Whew. Ryan, I'm going to need a water. Could you grab me one? Sorry, buddy. Thanks. Okay. Balek says, when will you take a look at the Metabone Speed Booster? I know. It's a big one. I will eventually, I promise. There's always so many other things to do, and that's a huge one. I think that I'm working towards, I've said this on the show before, I'm working towards doing fewer live shows, but now doing an edited show a week. That's kind of happening this week, but not on a proper schedule. I've actually shot most of a video yesterday doing a microphone comparison for the lavalier mics. Remember, so this is the Sennheiser I'm wearing now. I've got that Samsung one that's designed for phones and cameras that I'm testing, and I have the one from K&F Concepts. I think that's right. I did a big test with all three of those. Thank you very much. A big test with all three of those yesterday. It's partially edited. I need to record some more video to go along with it, but it's a very interesting results, and I can't wait to release that. I hope to release that on Friday. So now, anyway, my point is that now that I'm working towards that, it will give me the opportunities to do something like look at the Metabones adapter, because that's not something I can do live. Right? I need a lot more time than a live show allows for that. We'll get there. I know I've said it before, but we will get there. Okay, Laurent says, how come in video, if you're an S, speed priority, that's actually shutter priority. S is shutter priority. There is no aperture info. If you're an A, aperture priority, there's no speed info, shutter info. Oh, you're an auto ISO, there's no ISO info. I know. Okay, so the chosen, the shutter speed or the aperture that the camera chooses will show up when you push the button halfway, but it doesn't show up natively. This is something that I have asked Panasonic to address. I really want to see that info displayed full time. Unfortunately, that is not something that's in version 2. I'm sorry, I will continue to champion for that because that is a feature that I really want to see. I don't understand it. I really, really don't understand it. Evtonic, that's an interesting question. Evtonic says, what is the future of Adobe? Are they still innovating? That's a fair question. It seems... Okay, so I have kind of two different views on that. You look at something like Photoshop and Lightroom, and they're robust, mature, powerful products where they continue to add interesting new features here and there, but it's nothing, life-changing. They're interesting new features and nice stuff, certainly usable, but nothing that makes you go, oh my God, this is second coming, right? It's not there. But for the last couple of years, and I'm not going this year, unfortunately, but for the last couple of years, I've gone to the Adobe Max event. And Adobe Max is it's a show, it's an education event, it's a big party that Adobe throws. It's very expensive to go, but I've been able to go with Panasonic a couple of years, and you get to do a lot of learning there. You can learn from all kinds of experts about Adobe products, but you also get to see some of the things that they're working on. And every time I've seen some really cool stuff that I've yet to see come to fruition, I've yet to see come into a product. They had this amazing, none of it's NDA, it's nothing that I can't tell you about. So this amazing thing where they recorded like a paragraph of dialogue from somebody, and then from that we're able to essentially cut and slice the words and make them say anything you wanted. A little bit scary, but from just a short sample of voice data, you can create you can create them saying anything you want. Remarkable stuff, right? Really, really cool. A little scary, but really cool. They had this insanely awesome, this is 2 years ago and I still haven't seen this, insanely cool iOS app where, so you've got your iPhone, you put it on a tripod, and you're in front of, I don't know, the Eiffel Tower. And of course there's a million people around there. And you want to get a picture of the Eiffel Tower with no people in it. So you hit go on this thing. The camera has to be stationary. You hit go, and it starts shooting. It's, I guess, shooting, I don't know, pictures or just shooting video, whatever. But every single frame, things change, right? People move in and out of the frame. Over time, it sees what pixels don't move, the Eiffel Tower, the buildings, the trees around it, and what does move, the people. And every time there's a change, it takes that data of the difference between what is moving and what isn't moving, and starts to build up a pixel of what is supposed to be there and removes what isn't. So over time, you get no people in the scene. And it might take a few seconds, it might take a few minutes, depends on how much is going on in the scene. I did a demo of this with still photos using Affinity Photo. We'll link to the trailer up here. I don't remember the show it was now, but we'll link to it up here. And this shows how you can do this in post. You can take your camera, put it on a tripod, fire off 100 pictures, blend them together, and delete the people from your scene. They had an app that did this on your iOS device natively, real time. It was insanely cool. Still haven't seen it. So stuff like that is happening. I just don't know why it's not coming to market. Now, certainly they've got the wherewithal, the cash to continue doing this for quite some time. Hopefully they will continue to do more and more interesting things. Photography is largely moving to mobile. Obviously, on the higher end, you've got higher end production that's going in things like the GH5 and even bigger cameras. That separation of what you could do on a mobile device and what you need a pro camera for, that gap is getting bigger and bigger, right? The small point and shoots, low-end DSLR cameras are just getting less and less interesting. The more you can do on your iPhone or your Android phone, your Note, whatever, the more you can do there, the less you need a regular camera unless you're really high-end. Adobe's going to have to get some insertion in here, right? They're going to have to start doing more on the mobile side or more on the pro side. I'm not a Premiere user. Premiere is again, a robust, powerful app, but I don't think it's really that innovative anymore. I don't know. I don't use it. You see things like Resolve that are doing these incredible things with color correction, and you're going, okay, now that's really interesting. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a solid answer, but that's just kind of a stream of thought about Adobe. They're going to be around for a long time. They're not going anywhere anytime soon, but they're going to have to get their crap together because there's some really, really good software out there that's competing with Photoshop and Lightroom and so on that costs a lot less. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Okay, let's move on. Matt Pulchard says, I'm a hybrid shooter, video and still shooting with the G7 and GH4 and GH5. Awesome. On my GH5, my back button focus no longer works on some modes. Factory reset restore, bringing the problem back. Back button focus no longer works in some modes. That's curious. I don't know. I would say when I talked about the back button focus, that was a video a while ago. Someone was asking how do you autofocus while in manual focus mode. Someone had pointed out that back button does have to be set to autofocus and not to auto exposure lock, which I think is the default settings. If you restored, then it should be fine. Yeah, I don't know. If you're still not happening after a restore, a factory reset, then you may have another problem going on. Wait for the GH5 version 2 update, which is coming very soon, and then try it there and see if that fixes it. Scoregasm says, do you think companies will ever beef up the software/CPU in DSLR and mirrorless bodies to have a bit of parity with smartphones, considering how quickly they improve year over year? They just seem so behind. That's a very, very valid and interesting question. smartphones have a lot of computational, we call computational photography, or a lot of things happening on the processor side because the sensors and the lenses are not very good compared to a full-size DSLR or DSLM, right? Your full-size camera, you get a much bigger sensor, you've got a much bigger piece of glass. The quality of what's coming in and hitting that sensor and it was being recorded natively is infinitely better than what's being recorded on a little smartphone. It's just physics, right? You need the physical size of the glass and the sensor. So smartphone manufacturers, Apple and Google and everybody else, has gone to great lengths to make the image that you get look really, really good. And this is a lot of stuff happening after the picture's taken, or in real time, but effectively it's a lot of stuff happening in software to make the image look that good. Could full-size cameras start doing more of that as well? They absolutely could, and I agree. I think that they should. You look at the feature in the features in the iPhone 7 and 8 Plus and the 10, dual cameras, being able to do the depth differencing, being able to do the portrait lighting. Now that does require dual lenses, right? It's dual cameras. It's two different cameras side by side. The stereo image that creates that. Regular DSLRs don't have that, or you've got one. Unless you've got an old Rolleiflex, you've got one lens and one sensor, so you can't do that sort of thing. But there is a company that did this Kickstarter. I actually backed it, and it went through, and so at some point I'm going to get this device that it essentially adds this computational photography to your regular camera. It's not compatible with Lumix cameras, but I do still have some old Canons, so when I get it, I'm looking forward to just plugging it into my old Canon, like a 5D Mark II, and see what happens. But it supposedly will do things like you point it at a waterfall, and it analyzes the image in real time, understands it's a waterfall, does something around it to give you a gorgeous waterfall picture. Really interesting. And that kind of tech absolutely can and should and will have to be built into DSLRs and DSLMs if they expect to keep their foothold on the market. I haven't seen anything, though. I really haven't, from anybody. So very interesting question, very interesting point, and yeah, I agree. I mean, this has to happen, has to. Christopher Pepe says, I have a DVX, come back here, where'd it go? DVX 200, that is a Panasonic video camera, if I recall, and I can record different formats of video to different cards. Oh, right, yeah, the 28 megabit to one, 150 megabit to the other. Will this ever come to the GH5? Interesting, I have not heard of that coming. One way that you could do that, you couldn't do it internally. I mean, it's got dual card slots, so in theory that might be able to happen. I don't know if there's the processing power for it, but if the DVX 200 does it, you'd think there would be. But one way you can do it today is to record to an external recorder. So if you have a Blackmagic, I'm sorry, not a Blackmagic, a Ninja, right? An Atomos, this is the Ninja Assassin or the new Ninja Inferno. If you have this, you could record to ProRes on here and simultaneously record a lower bitrate internally. So there is that option, but it does require extra hardware. As far as just natively doing it internally, I haven't heard anything about that. It's certainly not something that's coming in version 2's firmware update. So, but make it a feature request. Go to message Panasonic and say, hey, I want this, and see what happens. That's a good idea. Do you know the date for the GH5 update? I do, but I don't think that's public, so I'm not going to tell you. Tyler Penrod says, yes to the speed booster video. I will get there. I'm really interested in real-world use with Canon lenses compared depth of field to native lenses. I am too, honestly, Tyler. I really am interested because I've got a bunch of old Canon glass. I am excited to put that on the GH5 and see what happens. It's cool. I know. I'll get there. Ralph says, are you looking forward to working with HLG HDR with the 2.0 firmware update? Your thoughts on HDR versus SDR? Okay, cool. Yes. I am looking forward to it. I was actually planning, so I'm leaving on a trip tomorrow morning. I'm going to vlog the whole way. Specifically, I'm going to be using the 8 to 18 lens. That's going to be my big real-world test for the 8 to 18, so I'm really excited about that. And I was going to shoot in HLG, but the editing capability, the editing possibilities, the editing options for shooting HLG, as I understand it right now, are quite limited. You have to use Resolve, DaVinci Resolve, and the render times of what you output are really, really slow. And I think, I shouldn't say, I don't know why. I don't know what's behind it. I don't know why that is, but it seems to me that software companies need to make some updates. Premiere's gonna have to get updated, Final Cut has to get updated, and maybe Resolve, maybe Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve actually needs to get some updates as well, because the kind of render times that I was hearing about are unacceptable. I mean, just forget it. That's not okay. So the hardware exists in the GH5. the software will exist with version 2 in the GH5. It's whether the editing side of it is caught up to it. I love the idea of it. I really do. I think that HDR video can be very, very powerful. You look at what we can do today to create HDR from a vlog file, and if you watch my GH5 training, you will see a fair amount of that. There's a whole section on the GH5 training where I talk about shooting in Vlog-L and then converting that for HDR use, and it's remarkable. The sample shot that I created was, and I've shown it on this show before, but the sample shot that I used is full sun day, high noon, shooting into a dark restaurant, but also seeing the full sun on the sidewalk and being able to get that full exposure in a single shot. It's remarkable. So you can shoot in Vlog-L and output HDR, and you can do that today, and that works out beautifully. It's the shooting in HLG, which is a hybrid log gamma, by the way, is what that stands for, which is a way to get HDR natively, is something that I think the software companies need to up their game on to really make useful. I know what you can do is shoot HLG on the GH5 with a version 2 firmware, take that clip and just upload it directly to YouTube, and if you have a Chromecast Ultra and a HDR television, you'll be able to see that in HDR. If you are just watching it on any non-HDR TV in SDR, standard dynamic range, you will just see the SDR version of it. Now, all of that said, so I'm about to go on the road and I'm going to do a couple of GH5 version 2 demos. I wanted to be able to show HDR on the road. And I bought a Chromecast Ultra, hoping that I could, not this one, but the Ninja Inferno is an HDR display, hoping that I could take the Chromecast Ultra, plug it into the HDR display, and get an HDR signal on it. It didn't work because this is a recorder, and the encryption that happens over HDMI, for HDCPI, something like that. Anyway, the encryption that happens senses that it's a recorder and blocks the signal. And I get it. It's so that you can't record somebody else's content. We have asked Atomos to make a firmware update so that you can plug in a Chromecast and see HDR, and when it senses a player like the Chromecast Ultra, it simply disables recording. That's something we've asked for, so hopefully we'll get that. That way you'd be able to have an HDR monitor for use in for that, and give you a way to preview your HDR content on YouTube without having to go out and buy a separate HDR television, assuming you already own a Ninja Inferno, obviously. Anyway, so I wanted to do that. That didn't work, so I had to send the Chromecast Ultra back. It was useless to me. I'm not going to go out and buy a big, huge HDR TV for this. But then I realized that Samsung makes the Tab 3, which is their high-end tablet, like the iPad, that has an HDR screen. So I bought one. All right, you guys got to help me out here. WTF. This screen is so high contrast and so oversaturated that everything looked terrible. I'm looking at YouTube, load up the YouTube interface, and all the thumbnails, the gamma is so low that all of the thumbnails, the shadow details, completely lost. It's just a bunch of black mush. They've dropped the gamma, cranked the contrast, and cranked the saturation. And I think that a lot of people who don't know anything about imaging look at it and go, ooh, this is really pretty, because they see the saturation and think better. But when you look closely, colors bleed together. Reds are just completely mush bled together. There's no detail in the blacks, no details in the highlights. Even looking at HDR content, it looked like crap. So I returned it. Like, this thing is useless to me. It doesn't look like HDR. It looks like an oversaturated version of an SDR image. So now I understand when Tim Cook stood on stage and said, for the iPhone X, this is the first OLED screen that's good enough for an iPhone. And I know a lot of people scoffed at that, and they're like, well, come on, all these other phones have had an OLED for a long time. If this is the standard for OLED, I get it. I get why you said that, because this was hideous. And I think a lot of people just don't see it, they don't care. But man, that was one disappointing screen. So that went back. So anyway, long way of saying I have no way right now of viewing HDR content short of going into Costco or Best Buy and plugging in a Chromecast that I no longer own because I returned it to preview the content. But I think HDR is absolutely a future for video. We're seeing more and more TVs. It's like when TVs did the whole 3D thing and nobody cared. HDR is different. HDR people care about, will care about certainly more, especially as more content comes out with it. So pretty cool on that. Whew, that's a long-ass answer to that question. All right. What else we got? Martin says, where'd it go? It does this when I'm scrolling. It pops off screen. My 25mm f1.4 has turned up today. Wow, lovely lens and loving the depth of field. Awesome. Glad you're enjoying it. That is a great lens. Johnny Cell Production says, I'm looking towards upgrading my Canon EOS 70D to the GH5. Excellent upgrade, my friend. Mainly for video recording. With the new firmware 2.0 update coming out, is it a good time to get the GH5 now? Absolutely. It's always been a good time to get the GH5. It's a fantastic camera, and it'll get even better. And if you're going to buy a GH5, please do get this. My GH5 training, go to gh5training.com. It is an in-depth 5.5-hour-long course on the GH5. Please do check that out. If you are a lynda.com or a LinkedIn Learning paid subscriber, you can also view the course on there. You don't have to pay any extra. But if you're not, you can buy it from me, gh5training.com. Please check that out. If you're going to buy a GH5, spend 5% of the purchase price of the GH5 to learn how to use your camera. Thank you. Okay, moving on. But yeah, it's a great time to get it. Amateur Media Group says, hey, do I need to update the current firmware before the new one, or can I just wait and install 2.0? Oh, no, you can just go straight to 2.0. He's asking because there was the 1.0 firmware that the GH5 shipped with, and then there was a I don't know, what was it, like a 1.1 or something. There's an update. You do not have to update to that. You will be able to go straight from 1.0 to 2.0, no problem. Don't worry about it. All right. Achita's saying, I think you have to set it to turn off autofocus. You might be talking about the back button focus, but back button focus should work whether you're in autofocus or manual focus mode. Matt Diver says, the Lumix does purple fringe removal in software, doesn't it? Yes. So, okay, this is an interesting point. So if you look at an app like Lightroom, you will find and you're shooting with Canon or Nikon or anything else, you will find when you look at your files in there, there is a camera correction, lens correction, I think is what it's called, profile. And they have a profile for every camera and lens combination pretty much under the sun. And this does things like distortion correction and fringe removal, because to some degree, pretty much every lens has some degree of chromatic aberration, which can be removed in software. When you drop a Lumix file on there, and I think it might be the same for Olympus files, but I don't know. I think it might be. But when you drop a Lumix file on there, it says something like embedded, corrective profile embedded or something like that. And you don't have access, you can't choose a lens combination. That is because Lumix cameras embed that corrective profile, that distortion, chromatic aberration, everything else profile into every single raw file. Based off of whatever lens you put on it, it embeds the right profile into that. So Lightroom reads that profile and gives you the right file. And I've actually seen software that wasn't written properly that didn't read the profile, and it's a huge difference. So that profile makes a really big difference to the file. And part of this is when you have the smaller sensors, it's like going down to the small sensor here, you need some degree of software correction to correct the things that happen when you have such a small sensor and such yada yada. So that's natively built into the files, which is really, really cool. So you don't have to think about it, it just exists, and off you go. So there you go. Martin says, my only issue with the 25, 1.4 I'm assuming, is you can slightly hear the lens moving when autofocus kicks in. That's not, wait, let me think about this. I think you're hearing the aperture, because that's not that is not a stabilized lens. I know the sound you're talking about. I'm well familiar with that sound, and it doesn't happen, oh boy, I'm trying to remember. I think you can hear the aperture move if you change the aperture while you're shooting, but you're generally not going to change the aperture while shooting video. If you need that, that's where you go into like the 12 to 60 new Leica that has the smooth iris control. It's not a lens that was originally designed for video, as far as I know, but that's never been, I haven't shot that much video with it, but I don't think that's ever been a problem, but I do know the sound that you're talking about. Matt Pilchard says, I'm looking forward to the firmware update. Have you seen any app that lets you read GH5 exported settings in a text editor? Oh, interesting. No, but if it's just a text, I never tried that, but you should be able to open it in something like Text Wrangler. That's what I use for all kind of XML type editing. I've never tried that though. You might be able to, but no, I haven't seen any app specifically. Trevor says, I agree with Martin Pitt that the Leica 25-1.4 is an incredible lens, potentially Panasonic's best. Oh, wow. In your opinion, in terms of pure optics, what is their best? Oh, boy. Pure optics, probably the Nocticron, the 25 f1.2. The 42.5 f1.2 Nocticron, insane lens, just gorgeous. That's what I think is probably their best lens. I could be wrong, but that's my opinion. Blue Rock Talk with Connie Willis. Hello, Connie says, is that a green screen or a cleaned up chalkboard? Happen to be watching on my phone while running errands. Okay, so this is neither a green screen nor a cleaned up chalkboard. This is essentially a piece of plywood, 4 by 8 foot. It's painted gray. It's not a chalkboard gray. It's just a gray. It has gotten a little bit scuffed up. Oh crap! I just scuffed it up again. It needs to be cleaned or repainted. So, but that's what that is. It's just a gray painted board. I have several of these. I have gray, black, white, and then I have wood ones, different stains of wood. If I'm doing a client shoot, I swap it out for a different background. Usually build a custom one for that shoot. It just depends. Same thing with the tabletop here. This is a sheet of aluminum on top of the table, but I have layers of different wood veneers underneath this. I can swap this out at any time. But this is for this show. This is the look for this show. Green screening, incidentally, the real-time keying using the ATEM with the backdrop so close to me doesn't work very well. It's too close. I get too much green reflection on my shoulders and around my head. I've done it. If you've watched the Apple keynote events where I've done the MST3K style commenting in the lower right corner, that is keyed out. I put up a green screen, turn off the front lights, backlight that so I'm in shadow, I'm a silhouette, cut out the green, and it works quite well. It's certainly not perfect, but it does work quite well. I think that if I had this farther away, it would work better. Plus, the ATEM it's not a dedicated keying hardware. If you want really good keying, there is hardware that you could spend probably more money than I spent on the ATEM itself to do really, really good real-time keying. I've seen, if you ever go to NAB, the big broadcast show in Vegas every April, and you walk around and look at some of the green screen real-time keying solutions, oh my God, it's mind-numbing how good some of this stuff is. Transparency, there's one demo. This person is standing, kind of their speaker, whatever. It's like it's a canned show, but there's a person standing there in front of an acrylic podium. Okay, so see-through podium, distortion as they move through it, and so on a green screen platform. Replace the entire scene, keeping the acrylic podium, and you can see through the podium, and you see the replaced background, and you see the distortion through the background. It's like, are you kidding me? So freaking cool. It's amazing what you can do with green screen these days, but it requires good hardware to do it right. Okay, back to the questions. Where are we? Ralph says, right now there are only 2 NLEs that I know of that support HLG. Resolve and Bakelite. Never heard of Bakelite. Who makes Bakelite? Also, HLG works in Rec 2020 and not Rec 709, hence the large rendering times. Oh, is that why it's the large rendering times? Thank you, Ralph. I did not know why. Okay, that's very interesting. Tell me more about Bakelite. Never heard of that before. All right, Daddy MCC says, was going back and forth on a wedding camera, either Nikon D750 or the GH5. I go to f-stoppers and they, of course, say I have to have full frame camera. Of course they do. I did my own test between the GH4 and the D750. I managed to get just as good pics of the GH4 as I got from the D750. Well, there's your answer. Okay, when it comes to wedding photography, shallow depth of field and low light performance are really important, right? Because you're shooting probably in a church or some type of indoor environment where there's not great lighting and you can't add your own light. And you pretty much always want shallow depth of field. Weddings, it's the shallow depth. It just looks pretty, separate the bride and groom from the background, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's nice. And it's not like these aren't things that you want in any environment shooting, shallow depth of field and good low light performance. But I think weddings, it's a particularly, this is kind of important there. Yes, you do get shallower depth of field with a full frame sensor and potentially better light performance with a full frame sensor. Obviously, it depends, right? Some full frame sensors don't have very good low light performance, while some small micro four thirds sensors have phenomenal low light performance. So it's not a general rule. It's not like there's not a hard science behind that. Like shallow depth of field, there's hard science there, right? You're going to get shallower depth of field on any given focal length and aperture because of the size of the sensor. That's math. You can't avoid that. With the low light performance, a lot of that is software based. It's partially the sensor, partially software, how good their low light noise reduction is. Okay, so that's it. That's why you're pretty much always going to hear, oh, if you're doing weddings, you got to do this. Now, I happen to know a few wedding photographers who are very, very good and very well known and very successful wedding photographers who shoot entirely on Lumix cameras. And there's no problems at all because the low light performance is absolutely good enough. And if you ever get into that really gnarly situation where it's just super dark, you can do remarkable things in software for low light, for noise reduction. And when it comes to shallow depth of field, you just got to buy the right glass for it, right? If you're shooting with the Nocticron, that's a favorite lens for wedding photographers, of course. f1.2, so you get this really nice shallow depth of field on that. That's gorgeous. Just shoot with glass that is really fast, really big aperture. You're going to get your extra light gathering capability, so you don't have to shoot it as high of an ISO, and you're going to get that shallower depth of field. No problems at all. If you're shooting shooting videos for your weddings, well, then I don't think there's any question. Clearly, you're going to want the Lumix camera. That's not even a debate worth having. So, so there you go. So I think you're going to be good with the GH5. And of course, if you have any questions about it, rent it. Rent both cameras. Give them a try in your professional workflow and see which one feels better. It's always a good way to do it. It's a good way to do it before you spend the money to buy is to rent. And if you do that, please do come back on the show and tell me what you decided and what you thought. Evtonic, ooh, excellent question. Let's see, what time is it? I'm going to do this last question. Means I'm probably going to squeeze in a couple more, but last question, and then we're going to move on. Evtonic says, when would I use a strobe over fixed lighting? Fantastic question. Okay, so let's talk about where you can't use a strobe. You can't use a strobe for video. All right, when you're shooting video, you have to have constant lighting. So that's an easy one. If you're shooting video, you need constant lighting. Unless you're doing something, I think Joey L did this crazy thing once where he had a pro photo that could shoot strobe, kind of stroboscopic at 30 frames per second, and sync that with the video, and that was kind of epically weird. But for the most part, and you people will go nuts being strobed 30 times a second. But if you're doing video, you need constant lighting, so that's an easy one. But for still photography, when would you use strobe versus constant light? So a lot of it's going to depend on the subject matter and the environment and also personal preference. So let's talk about LED lighting or constant lighting first. It's easier. Right? It is certainly a lot easier because what you see is what you get. Right? It's WYSIWYG, that old term. You take a light, you shine it at a subject, you know how the shadow is going to play off them, what the exposure is going to be like. You see it in front of you without even looking through the camera. You know exactly what it's going to look like. You bring the light closer or farther. You change the color temperature of the light. You put a modifier on it, diffuser, umbrellas, bounces, whatever. You see it in real time. So it's really easy to set it up and get exactly the lighting configuration that you want. But you don't have anywhere near the amount of light, so as you do from a strobe. So you still have to shoot at a higher ISO than you would with strobes. Or if you don't want really shallow depth of field, you want to be able to stop the lens down. Maybe you're shooting a group portrait or whatever the environment, you need to have multiple layers of things in focus. You don't want to have really shallow depth of field. That can be hard to do when you're working with constant lighting because the amount of light, while it may seem like a lot of light when you compare it to a strobe, it's nothing, right? The amount of light coming out of any LED is nothing compared to even a small pocket strobe for a quarter of the price. So you end up having to shoot wide open, and that may be a problem. So when you want larger depth of field for your studio photography, whether you're shooting portraits, group portraits, product photography, whatever it might be, you might need to have a strobe just to get that extra amount of light so that you can stop down a bit and not have to go to some crazy ISOs. You get a lot more light, so once you get used to it and you understand how to control it, you do have a bit more flexibility, I think, when you're shooting with strobes. As far as bouncing lights off of things, going through different modifiers. If you take an LED light, let's say you've got an LED light that's this big, and you want to have a nice big diffusion panel. If I put this little light in front of a big diffusion panel, I'm going to lose so much light from that. Whereas if I take a little strobe and I punch it through the diffusion panel, yes, I'm still going to lose a lot of light, but I started off with so much more light that I can easily go to a large diffusion panel, whereas with LEDs, you just can't. I own a really cool softbox. I think Westcott makes it. That it's an umbrella, not softbox, sorry. Well, it's kind of like a mix. Anyway, you open it up, and you've got the diffusion panel here, and then a hole in the middle. And you put the light up in the hole, and you point it towards the back, right? So it's a parabolic shape like this, and you're putting the light facing this way, bounces in the back, fills this all silver, and comes out with this nice, big, huge, it's like this big diffusion panel. It's really, really cool. If I try to do that with my LED lights, I can't get enough light out of it. So I have this thing called a triple threat. It's a 3-headed adapter that goes on top of the light stand that I can mount 3 LEDs to. Now I can get enough light coming out of that to light a portrait and do a nice portrait with LED light, or if I'm going to do video. But it takes a lot of light. It takes a lot to go through that. So hopefully that helps answer, at least start you on the right path towards answering your question. If you're doing video, you have to use LED. There's no doubt, and there's no two ways about it. If you're doing stills, you have a choice. It's easier to work with LEDs, but you can spend a lot less and get equivalent light out of strobes, or spend the same money and get a lot more light out of strobes. So I hope that helps answer your question. All right, anything else? Tyler, I've used Micro Four Thirds cameras for wedding for video for a while now and somehow managed to get great depth of field. I know, right? Isn't that crazy? I love it when people say you can't get shallow depth of field out of Micro Four Thirds. Talk to the hand. You clearly don't know what you're talking about. Curdy says, next week I travel to the US. Welcome. I'm thinking to take my GH5 and I don't know which lenses should bring with me. Yeah, bring them all. They're small and lightweight. Matt Diver, all I think UK, Europe called strobe flash. All right, strobe flash. When I say flash, I think small on-camera flash. When I say strobe, I think big studio strobe. They're all the same thing. It's just different names. Bart Johnson says, have you seen the new Aperture 300D LED light? Roughly a 2K tungsten output just went up for purchase yesterday. I have not. Sounds like a fun toy. All right, we're going to look that up because now I want to know what it is. And Aperture makes some cool stuff for sure. Aperture. Come on, let's Aperture. Let's load this up. Ooh, look at this thing. Aperture 300D. Whoop, hey, come back here. Let's see, what is it? Aperture 300D, the biggest and brightest light we've ever made. Winner of several awards. Best lighting product at NAB. Can't argue with that. All right, so it is a TLCI rating of 96. Does it say what the equivalent? Okay, here we go. Equivalent output. No, do not notify me. Equivalent output, reflector, Fresnel hood, Fresnel spot. So what are we getting? 10,000, 100,000 lux, 150,000 lux. Without a comparison, it's really hard to know. Professional mount, yada yada. Looks nice. I don't know the light. I don't know how much light that is without comparing it to a strobe. That's with camera setting to f36. What? f36. Who said f36? The camera even goes to f36. The heck. Big fans. I'm looking for a price. Tell me how much it is. Looks great, but again, whatever that's outputting, you could spend a lot less money on a strobe or flash and get that equivalent output. That I guarantee you. Okay, that's it. We're gonna wrap this thing. Thank you very much for hanging out, guys. Always, it's $1,099. Bart says you could buy a big strobe for $1,000 or a lot of little ones. Especially if you go for the cheap Chinese knockoffs. Man, you can get a lot of light for $1,000. A lot of light. So, no arguing though. I mean, I'm sure it's a fantastic product. I own the a Felix light kit that's 4 lights. It was like $3,000 for this lighting kit. I love it, but it's great for video. And I've used it for some stills where I've needed that type of lighting for whatever reason, where I didn't need a whole lot of light. But yeah. Oh, okay, let me one more addition to the when to use it. One of the other big advantages of LED is if you just need to add a little bit of light to a scene and you want to color balance it, it's really easy with a LED that has a color tunable, a color temperature tunable, which my Felix lights do, not all lights do, but if you got color temperature tunable, then you can adjust the color temperature to match your ambient lighting, and that's really cool. With a strobe, you have to drop filters in. Oh, do I need a quarter CTO or half CTO or what? It's a pain in the ass. But with color tunable, ooh, that's pretty slick. We like that. That's really neat. Okay, I'm out of here. Take care of yourselves, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.